Good afternoon. Welcome to In Focus. I'm Dennis Ward. Today we're putting the Wet'suwet'en conflict and solidarity actions that have continued in focus. And we want you to join in on our conversation. Our phone lines are open. Call us toll free at 1-877-647-2786. You can also tweet us at APTN InFocus or email infocus@aptn.ca. Before I introduce you to our guests, let's set the scene. On February 5th, talks between hereditary chiefs opposed to the Coastal GasLink pipeline and the BC government broke down. Early the next morning, RCMP moved in, making arrests at the various camps.
How dare they do this? They come in under the cover of darkness. Now they won't even let media in to track. They're going to try to put out propaganda saying that they did this peacefully, and yet people are removed from the land.
In the days that followed, more arrests were made at Gidimt'en Camp and Unistaten. Protests in solidarity with the hereditary chiefs followed almost immediately. Government offices were occupied, streets shut down. So was one of Canada's busiest rail corridors in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. That blockade became a focal point. 2 weeks of concerns being raised over the rule of law and the impact on the economy.
We have gone through exhausting every possibility for dialogue, for engagement, for finding peaceful solutions to de-escalate this every step of the way. And we remain open to that, but we are waiting for Indigenous leadership to show that it also understands. The onus is on them. We will be there to discuss, but the barricades must come down.
On Monday, the RCMP moved in to clear the blockade in Tyendinaga. Almost immediately, new blockades went up in the area, as well as additional actions across the country. Joining us now via Skype in Victoria is Ellis Ross, the Liberal MLA for Skeena, British Columbia, and a former Chief Councillor of the Haisla Nation. In Smithers, Molly Wickham, the spokesperson for Gidimt'en Access Point. Joining us via Skype from his home in Kanesatake, Dan David, a longtime journalist who was also the first ever news director here at APTN News. And from our Ottawa studio, APTN News reporter Brett Forrester, who has been covering the events unfolding over the past month. And in Calgary on the phone, Fort Nelson First Nation Chief Sharlene Gale, who is the chair of the First Nations Major Projects Coalition. Thank you all for joining us today. Molly, if we could start with you, maybe, what is the latest there? Have police pulled back at all?
No, the RCMP have not pulled back from patrolling the area. They have not made moves to take down the CISO detachment that's been illegally occupying our territory on Gidimt'en territory. We are awaiting confirmation and timelines about when these demands will be met, and currently those have not been met by the RCMP.
Molly, we understand there's a meeting of the hereditary chiefs and potentially a statement coming any time now. Have you any insight you can provide on that?
Yeah, our hereditary chiefs are working very diligently and very hard and long hours to try to resolve this issue. The demands that they've set out and the discussions that they've put out there are not really hard demands to meet. And so when I hear the government and Justin Trudeau talking about how he's tried everything and the onus is on us, we are the ones that have put out our arm to have these discussions, but we need those conditions met so that we aren't making decisions and having discussions under duress.
Brett, there have been many demonstrations in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs opposed to the Coastal GasLink natural gas pipeline. It's almost difficult to keep a handle on. It's something you've been tasked with navigating. Can you kind of sum up what's taking place today out there?
Yeah, I'll summarize with what's happening right now. Perhaps the most compelling scene that's happening right now is happening on CN tracks near Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. We've seen a standoff today where trains have begun to pass through, and we saw a scene where the demonstrators there had lit a big pile of skids on fire, and people were actually staring down a train, throwing debris onto the tracks. And we saw police standing on the other side of the tracks, waiting for the train to pass. And once it did pass, they were both standing there with the tracks kind of acting as a symbol between them. So we've actually just got a statement from the OPP, which I'll read a part of. This is from Bill Dixon. He says individuals have continued to place items on or adjacent to the tracks, which is putting both their and other people's in safety. And he says they could face charges for this. Meanwhile, on West Block, in the background behind me, MPs and federal politicians are debating this in the House of Commons, or they have just finished debating this in question period. And we had a very heated and spirited exchange in there, a lot of vigorous debate, a lot of booing even, and heckling, and it got to the extent where the speaker had to stand up and he compared them to a schoolroom of rowdy children. So that's going on right now, and of course there's other rail blockades that are popping up. Some are restarting, some have been taken down. There's one near Hamilton that police dismantled and arrested, I believe it was 3 people last night. On Monday, the Gidimt'en hereditary chiefs, 3 of them were arrested by RCMP for restarting a blockade that they had originally taken down, so these talks could take place. There's one in Listagouche, First Nation territory. An injunction has been served there to dismantle that. And there's also one on Ganawage where an injunction has been served, but that one hasn't been dismantled. And that one's been going strong for almost 3 weeks now.
And an action planned here in Winnipeg later this afternoon as well. Dan, you're joining us from Mohawk territory. It did look like a pretty dramatic scene out there today. What are your thoughts on what you've been seeing?
Well, first of all, let me add to the story coming out of Ganawage. There was just something came out of La Presse online, and that's a French language newspaper here in Quebec, one of the better known newspapers. And they just ran a story talking about Premier Legault, the Premier of Quebec, saying that the Mohawks have AK-47s at that blockade. I don't know if it's true. I don't know where he's getting the information from, but if so, I mean, that's pretty explosive information. Wow. I know that the police went in there earlier, and the peacekeepers on the res, and they checked out everybody. They let people know that they weren't going to move in on enforce the injunction, as long as it was a peaceful demonstration, as long as, you know, allowed to demonstrate, express themselves, and as long as they didn't go and threaten anybody or do anything, you know, react to provocation, because there has been a lot of provocation as well.
Chief Gale, you're joining us from an energy conference in Calgary right now. You know, that's in part held by the National Coalition of Chiefs, who've been trying to elevate the voices of those First Nations who are in favor of Coastal GasLink. What are your thoughts on what's been unfolding for 3 weeks plus now?
Well, as the chair of the First Nation Major Projects Coalition, all I can do is strongly encourage the proponents and the Crown to actively work with the affected First Nation to interpret their degree of adherence to the principles and criteria of how they want this project laid out. I know there has been a lot of dialogue and meaningful engagement directly with some of the affected First Nations, but in order to find the best path forward is we have to work towards consent, and that can't be unilateral interpretation by the Crown or proponent, which will, if that's happening, then it's just going to lead to failure. First Nations have been a part of the economy for many decades. However, over the last 100 years, there's been some challenges, and I think maintaining and building these relationships are really important, and working towards a positive path of prosperity also means that you have to look at the environmental stewardship of the land, and the people that are best to make those decisions are the ones that have been there for thousands of years. So, I know how important this project is for people, but We really got to get down to what's important, and I think the people that are directly affected need to be able to have an avenue where they can communicate what their needs are. At the end of the day, it's a decision that needs to be made by the Wet'suwet'en, and you know, as a leader of my community, I know what happens when we're not directly involved in economic opportunities, and so I feel for them, and I can't really get directly involved in what's happening there on their lands or their territory because I don't live there and I'm not part of their community.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Ross, you're joining us from your office, I assume. You managed to get in today. The BC legislature has been the focus of a number of demonstrations, one earlier today as well that still could be ongoing. You believe all these actions are raising the risk of violence for Indigenous people. Can you explain?
So, a number of my band members are being confronted in grocery stores and the street, and they're being blamed for blockading the ports and the railways just because of the color of skin. And my members, all they ever wanted was an opportunity to job, some training, to look after their family. So for them to be exposed to violence or some threatening comments, either online or in public, is entirely unfair. And then, by the way, the blockaders have the luxury of disguising themselves because they're afraid of violence. Well, my band members can't walk around in disguises and talk pavas and everything like that. All anybody ever really wants, and this is the point everybody's missing, after 15 years of hard work trying to develop the process to address Aboriginal entitlement in our communities regarding a smelter, regarding a methane facility, regarding forestry, regarding pipelines, we finally developed the process. But the number one goal was to address poverty. And hey, if your communities have addressed poverty, suicide, unemployment, great. I'm happy for you. I applaud you, but my community hadn't. It wasn't until we took those first steps 15 years ago when we saw a glimmer of hope that yes, we can break the cycle. And now it's basically in danger of going away.
Ms. Wickham, are you? Is this something that you've been worried about, the violence and the threats of violence that are out there right now? There's, as we know, a lot of hate online, at least.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. And let's just be clear that as an Indigenous woman, my chances of being murdered are 5 times as likely as any other women in this country or in this province. And the fact that there's man camps being built on our territory that will increase the violence against our Indigenous women is unacceptable. The racism and the threats of violence are not, they're not being created by this problem. They exist already in this country. They exist already in our communities. And we know that our safety is at the utmost important, the future generations, the safety of those people. And we know that culture saves lives. We know that our identity and our connection to the land is what will combat suicide, is what is helping heal our people and combating poverty and combating all of these social ills caused by industry and caused by colonization. And we've also done a lot of research on the impact of boom and bust economies on rural Indigenous communities. And we know that the rates of violence, the rates of gang violence increase. The rates of violence have already increased 40% in one of our nearby communities since the pipeline project started. And so yes, there is a risk of violence, there is a risk of racism. We experience it every day, regardless, in our lives. And this is what we're trying to combat, not the fact that people are mad because their jobs might be affected.
Dan, was this racism always there and just now, you know, being more public in a more public way?
Yeah, it's always been there. Only now it's being allowed an outlet, usually through social media, but a lot more coming out on the streets and on the sidewalks and in the alleys. It's always been there. It's not growing. It's just a lot more acceptable somehow now.
And going to talk a bit about how the media might be playing into that. But first, we have a caller on the line. Russ calling us from Ontario. Russ?
Yes, I'm calling you from Fort Erie. I walked the Yellowhead. I hitchhiked it, And back in '79, it wasn't known as the Highway of Tears. I think if the RCMP put as much effort into solving the missing Indigenous men and women as they are busting protesters, I don't think the situation would be as scary as it is. And Tataina, water's life, right? It's only 3 Mohawk words I know, and I drink the same water as everybody else, and I think we need another pipeline like we need a hole in the head. And seriously, when the pipeline crews come in, they're hunters. They're not hunters to subsistence hunt. They just kill things for the sake of killing. They trophy hunt. Honestly, I worked in the oil patch. Guys kill things just for a hoot. So when the crew rolls through, how many jobs will be left at the end of it all? And APTN, you got to keep it coming. The country needs you. I stand in solidarity with anybody who stands up to anything against the pipeline. And seriously, what kind of condition is the water going to be in when you can't get to a leak? How do you get up to a leak 10,000 feet up the side of a freaking mountain? It's rough country, and anybody who says that they need another pipeline, the hell with them. Keep up.
Russ, appreciate you giving us a ring there. I understand we have one more caller on the line from parts unknown, I guess. Go ahead, caller.
Take care.
Thanks, Russ. Okay, I guess we don't have that other caller. Maybe Mr. Ross, if you want to touch on some of the things that he had to say there about, jobs not being around afterwards, the pipeline leaking, not being needed, these types of things.
Well, if there is a leak, there's been a natural gas pipeline in BC that's gone through our communities from Prince George to Kitimat for the last 60 years. And that pipeline, they're actually providing natural gas, heat, and electricity for our community for the last 6 years. And it did leak. It was our public works that actually built those pipes to our communities. And every single time that gas went up into the air, it didn't pollute. It didn't pollute anything. In fact, the safety record that I've seen from the current pipeline, the crews actually utilize, especially nowadays, they utilize brownfield locations. And people, I don't want these pipelines to go into remote areas as much as the next person, because I want access in case something happens. That's for the jobs. I've heard this argument before. And that kind of, everybody kind of thinks that all of us are just looking for jobs in the plant once it's built. That's not true. That's not how it works. Once the plant is built, there's a number of jobs inside the plant. But then all the other businesses come to town and they start to service that. We're talking about taxis, mechanics, everything pops up around it. In fact, Kitimat itself, the town of Kitimat, was built up on the same idea. Without the moving smoke from there'd be no Kitimat. And by the way, our people enjoy the services that provided. It brought doctors and nurses and hospitals, highways, electricity. There's our descendants that actually appreciated and welcome those conveniences.
We're going to, as I said, speak about the media and also hear much more from online as well. We're going to head to social media after the break. We do just need to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on InFocus.
Join our conversation now. Call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Welcome back to In Focus. We're talking about Wet'suwet'en conflict here today, and if you want to look at APTN's full coverage on this all, you can visit aptnnews.ca/Wet'suwet'en. Let's go to social media now with our social media editor, Jesse Andrushko, to hear what some of you are saying about today's topic.
Thanks, Dennis. We posted a poll asking, are you happy with the media coverage of the Wet'suwet'en conflict and the blockades in support of the hereditary chiefs? With over 1,000 respondents, 24% voted yes, 76% voted no. We shared a few questions online and we got a lot of feedback. We asked, How do you feel about the blockades in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs? Diane said, I am with the Indigenous peoples. It's about time people stand up for their rights. The government has to learn that they cannot treat people as an inconvenience. From Morris, I'm all for pipelines. At least if you build a pipeline, it eliminates the need for trucks and trains to be spewing all their exhaust into the atmosphere. Brenda responded, I support the Wet'suwet'en and their supporters. I am absolutely ashamed to be part of a country that would invade a territory for a pipeline. We also asked, how has the blockades changed Canada's perception of Indigenous issues and pipeline projects? Michael said, unfortunately, more people don't like Natives today than a month ago. These rail blockades are so counterproductive and self-defeating. Bob commented, such acts only enforce resentment towards Indigenous people. You are contributing to the problem, and this will solve nothing. Sharlene said, people are more informed and more allies standing in support of Indigenous rights. That is evident from all of the events across Canada. Lastly, from Tina, it has set reconciliation back by a generation. Well done. If you would like to see our coverage of the Wet'suwet'en conflict, visit aptnnews.ca/Wet'suwet'en. Also, if you'd like to add your opinion, here's how. Join our conversation now. Call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. Like us on Facebook on our APTN News page. Follow or tweet us at APTN InFocus. And send your thoughts to infocus@aptn.ca.
Thanks, Jesse. And if you're just joining us, our guests today are via Skype in Victoria, Ellis Ross, the Liberal MLA for Skeena, British Columbia, now a former Chief Councillor of the Haisla Nation. In Smithers, Molly Wickham, the spokesperson for Gidimt'en Access Point. Joining us via Skype from his home in Gidimt'en, Dan David, who was the first ever news director at APTN News. And from our Ottawa studio, APTN News reporter Brett Forrester, who has been covering the events. And in Calgary, Fort Nelson First Nation Chief Sharlene Gale. And we're going to head to the phone lines now again. We have Pietro, I believe, from British Columbia.
Good day, how you doing?
Good, yourself?
I'm doing good.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask the panel guests that you have there today. I've been watching this for the last 10 or so years. Obviously, before that, there were issues and concerns surrounding rights and title. My question to the panel members would be, in all the documentation and literature, is anyone able to point the public in Canada, the general public, in a direction that, in that literature or that case law with Delgamuth decision, where it stipulates that the hereditary chief hold jurisdiction and authority over traditional territory only, and where it stipulates that the INAC Chief Council have jurisdiction and authority over reserve land? I've looked, and I haven't been able to find it, and I've kind of put the challenge out there to as many people as possible to find it, because that's an integral part of what we're dealing with, I think, here.
Thanks, Pietro. Chief Gale, as a chief, were you able to hear that question, and do you have a response?
I think it would be probably best to contact the people directly involved in that case. They're the experts. They're the ones that lived throughout that process. And I would reach out to the community leaders and people that you've seen that were part of that experience.
Molly, not sure, is that something you were wanting to speak about at all, or should we just move on?
I just think that the more we don't...
Go ahead, Chief.
The more we don't involve First Nation major project development, the more that we're going to see this happen. Nations just want to have their inherent right to govern themselves and to exercise their right to self-determination. Indigenous laws are so important, and we've seen a lot of these issues and solutions come out of the Truth and Reconciliation. I think every Canadian should read that document. It's so important. Don't just let it pass by your desk. Print it out, go online, read that. Indigenous laws are so important for the fact that they're higher laws than any law that has ever been imposed on us, and they need to be respected.
Ms. Wickham, we'll go to you first.
The Mohawks down here, that's been our platform since since before contact that we're an independent nation. We have our own laws, our own institutions, our own way of doing things, and yet that was shoved aside when the Indian Act and the colonial system came in, and we still maintain that we have inherent rights over traditional territories. The band councils may be able to rule the roost on the reserves, but we have much broader aims as far as traditional people are concerned. Yes, I'm talking as a traditional person and a journalist.
Ms. Wickham, we'll go to you, and then Mr. Ross will let you weigh in.
Okay, great. So with the Delgamuukw Stay Away court case, you can find the information in the summary of the court case. Because the hereditary chiefs, there's 13 house chiefs that are responsible for 13 houses that make up the 5 clans, and they were the ones that actually brought the case forward as hereditary leadership, as a traditional form of government that was accepted into the court. So the very fact that it was the traditional leaders that brought the case forward, and that the decision was that they had never extinguished title over 22,000 square kilometers of Wet'suwet'en territory, affirms the fact that they still hold jurisdiction over those territories. You won't find anything about the Indian Act in there. You'll find the details of the Indian Act band council system in the Indian Act itself when it talks about lands, reserve lands put aside for Indian people.
Mr. Ross?
The question was, where in the Delgamuukw court case does it say hereditary chiefs hold jurisdiction on rights and title versus the Indian Act, elected chief and council? And the thing about it is that case law around Aboriginal rights and title only rules on principles. And it's not just Delgamuukw. You can't just take Delgamuukw and just take the decision and apply that to Aboriginal rights and title across the board. You got to read it in concert with Haida, Mikisew Cree, Gladstone, and all of these other court cases. And even if that was true, because that principle has never come up in Delgamuukw, but even if that was true, how do you reconcile that with another principle of case law that says Aboriginal rights and title is a communal right, meaning it belongs to the community? So that's contradicting the whole nature of Aboriginal rights and title.
Dan, is this, what we're talking about right now, something that's kind of been missing from the debate as well? What we've been hearing a lot of in the media, and as you saw there, 24% of the people on our poll were happy with the media coverage so far. It's focused a lot on whether you're for or against the pipeline.
I think that when you start comparing over the last 30 years since the Oka crisis here, the conversation has gone a long, long way. And a lot of the topics that we're talking about here today and has been going on out west with Wet'suwet'en, I mean, these topics have been discussed over and over and over again, especially in the media. They're finally beginning to grasp a lot of the key issues. When my learned gentleman down at the other end of the line says that these things are irreconcilable, no, they're not. That's where we need to talk. We need to take a look at what has happened, where the two systems have split apart, why they're separate the way that they are, why they're not recognizing each other. In our case here, a lot of it has to do with religious bigotry as well as political expediency. The money comes through the band office. It doesn't go to the traditional government. And so, on the one hand, you have a group of people who have inherent rights and have argued they've never sold or surrendered those rights. And on the other hand, you have an Indian Act Band Council, which, for want of a better term, is really nothing more than a branch office of the Indigenous Affairs Department. So, we need to talk. If we're going to get that's one of the great schisms that this story is really exposed within our own communities, and we need to continue that kind of conversation because that gets to the heart of the last 150 years of our experience in this country.
Mr. Ross, I gather you're not in agreement with what Dan has to say here.
No, because if we want to have a conversation about this, stop with the identity politics. Stop putting down elected chief and councils. They're not bad people, especially out west. I don't know what it's like back east, And I don't think that's a fundamental issue that most chief and council are trying to deal with out here out in the West. The fundamental issue we're trying to deal with is we want to stop the suicides. We want to stop our people going into prison. We want to stop our children going into care. We want to stop the unemployment. And every article that you read about Indigenous issues in Canada, there's always that one section that says a job would go a long way. I've even heard some Aboriginal elected chiefs saying, look, I try to save people from committing suicide, and as a man, the one thing that always comes out and says, I got nothing, I can't provide for my family. All the rest of this is window dressing. If we don't fix the Aboriginal issues by any means necessary, then all we're doing is the same thing that we talked about for the last 50 years. It's the Aboriginal people themselves I care about.
So what's your fix?
Exactly what we're doing for the last 15 years. Come to my community. We've cut the suicide rate almost in half. The employment, our younger generation is not going through the same social issues that I did. I was a fall down drunk. I just wandered my village doing crimes and smoking drugs. I'm doing everything I can to make sure that Aboriginals survive and thrive in the 21st century, and it's working. For the last 15 years, it's been working. And now that they're thriving, now that we can put our resources towards saving our culture and language.
Chief Gale,
and where does that culture and language and all of the principles and the values come from? Does it come from a document handed down by Ottawa?
No, it comes from the community. It comes from our matriarchs and our chiefs.
It comes from the land. What we're doing. It comes from the land.
It comes from the land.
Exactly, but it
comes from the land, and if your land is destroyed, then you have nothing. Then you don't have a future of culture, and you don't have a future for your language, and you don't have a future for your matriarchs or your inherent governance system. If your land is destroyed, you are destroyed as a people. It's called assimilation.
There's two perspectives going on here, and neither one is looking at or talking to the other one. They're pretending the other doesn't exist. And that's what I think is the problem.
I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to listen here, but I'm getting dismissed. So you talk about destroying the land. Are you talking about the Wet'suwet'en who actually logged off their own territory under the Forest Range Agreement Acts, who actually has a sawmill inside Morristown? Is that what you're talking about, destroying the land?
I think that if you look at the conflict between the Indian Act ban system and the hereditary chiefs, this is something that's very deeply ingrained, and that our hereditary chiefs have said over and over, we are not going to fight with our own people. We don't think that people that are elected band councils are bad people. They're trying to do the best thing for their communities. The hereditary chiefs have a thousands of year old responsibility under our governance system that demands and requires by law, by our law, that they protect the territory for the future generations, because we know that that's where our culture and our language and our future lies, and because we have one of the most pristine waterways left in this whole area, and we're not intent on fighting with our own people or with any other band councils either. We want to work together, and it's not the individuals, it's not the hereditary chiefs that are picking this fight with bands, it's not the band council leaders that are picking this fight with the hereditary chiefs, it's the government and private industry that are pitting us against each other, and that needs to stop.
Chief Gale, as an elected official, would you mind weighing in here?
So I just wanted to say, as the coalition, like, we're not a project-specific organization. It's really up to the community to decide what projects are they're wanting to get involved in. We're not a political organization, and we also don't tell our members what to do or say. All we do is provide the capacity tools so they can make these informed decisions, and First Nations have an opportunity to say yes, or they have an opportunity to say no based on the information they receive. I think we need to respect, as we move forward in this next 100 years, and design, how First Nations want to move forward a major project. But, I can tell you the coalition members are working collaboratively and cooperatively and cohesively towards the enhancement of economic well-being of our respected nations. We want our membership we want our people to be able to continue the environmental stewardship and have those things that mean so much to us, because a lot of the stories do come from the land, And you can't practice your culture if you don't have fresh water to drink, fresh air to breathe. So, you know, these two things have to go in balance. And I don't think that anybody can go in and tell a community whether or not they should be involved in a project. I mean, it really has to come down to the community at the end of the day. But we all, I think, want the same thing, and we all want to care for our families. We all want to have good lives, and we all have to come together as one. At the end of the day, you know, when we talk about being one, I think that's the path forward. First Nations working with their local municipalities, working with the provincial and federal government, and other neighboring nations. Because when you look at a project, you have to kind of talk about what the impacts are going to be to other nations. Rivers just don't stand still. They run through communities. So at the end of the day, we do want to build a strong economy that is reliant on a healthy environment supported by our cultures, our language, and expression of traditional laws. And so I think that's important that people have the right to say yes or no, whether a project meets their needs.
We have a number of callers on the line. We're hopefully going to get to some of those. We do just need to step aside for another quick break, and then we're going to continue the conversation here on In Focus. Welcome back to In Focus, where today we're discussing the Wet'suwet'en conflict and the solidarity actions that have followed, the arrests in Wet'suwet'en territory and other places. And I understand we have Rick on the line joining us from Ontario. Rick, go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much for taking my call. I called in just to say I'm watching the program, which I enjoy this show very much, In Focus, and many other shows you have on this channel. I was watching the bald-headed, I'm sorry to do it this way, but I can't remember his name, the gentleman with the white shirt on. I think he said he was a chief and that he was trying, and the chiefs that are in BC that are trying to bring work or jobs into their communities and saving people from trying to commit suicide because it looks like there's no light at the end of the tunnel for them. It doesn't just affect Indigenous people, but I can see where, when he was speaking, where there was the opportunity in the communities he's representing to raise yourself up to a level, you know, where you weren't contemplating suicide or any other, you know, act that would hurt yourself.
Right.
So, and the other thing I want to make one comment on, I hope, after all of this turmoil that we're going through, that at the end of the day, that the pipeline ends up going through the Indigenous property, and all it got resolved was that the government ended up giving the Indigenous people in that area money. So if it comes down to money, it just frustrates me. That's all.
Well, Rick, we appreciate your call. I believe you were referring to Ellis Ross, who is the MLA, Liberal MLA, out in British Columbia, and my understanding is we've actually lost our connection with him. But Rick, we do appreciate your thoughts on this. Ms. Wickham, maybe we can go to you and just your thoughts on how the federal and provincial governments have been handling this whole situation. Your thoughts on that?
I think that they've been handling this situation the way that they've always handled Indigenous issues and conflict, is with brute force. You know, they're saying and laying claim to the fact that they're trying everything that they can. They haven't been doing the work that they say that they've been doing on reconciliation. They've been sending in RCMP. Obviously, the invasion on Wet'suwet'en territory was what started all of this, but this has been going on for a lot longer than just this pipeline issue. So I think that the province, John Horgan, has failed miserably at resolving this issue. The RCMP have failed miserably at resolving this issue. They're not coming to the table with anything to offer the Wet'suwet'en. They're coming to the table and telling us that we have to concede, that we're the only ones that have to concede in this situation, and that's just unacceptable.
Brett, what's your sense of what might unfold here from the Ottawa perspective? Like you say, the House of Commons, they're being called school children or whatever it was there. That might not be just a one-time thing. But, you know, you have the Conservative leader saying, criminalizing people, saying these are non-Indigenous activists out there. What's going to happen from Ottawa's perspective?
Well, I think what we've heard from Ottawa here, certainly Mark Miller, Minister of Indigenous Services, and Carolyn Bennett, Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, they've been asked multiple times about this by reporters, and they say that they're optimistic that talks can take place. We know they've been in contact with the hereditary chiefs. They've been in contact with the Mohawks at Tyendinaga, and the mood right now is that they are optimistic that these talks can happen. But as Ms. Wickham has mentioned, there are two demands that have been made by the hereditary chiefs, which is that the RCMP pull back, and we understand that they have agreed to pull back so long as they can continue to patrol the territory and so long as the Coastal GasLink pipeline workers continue to have access to their sites. And the second demand, of course, made by the hereditary chiefs is that CGL abides by their eviction notice that they gave. So something has to give at this point. So they do say they're optimistic on the Hill today, and talks are ongoing, so we very eagerly await to see what comes out of those preliminary discussions, I suppose you would call them.
Dan, where do you see something giving here?
Everybody's waiting here at the various blockades. I know with the Mi'kmaq, with the Kahnawake Mohawks, and here at Kanesatake, waiting for some word from the traditional chiefs at Wet'suwet'en. When they say they're satisfied, then people say that they'll remove whatever they're doing, you know, whether it's a blockade or just a traffic slowdown. I think that governments have really blown it. I mean, they had an opportunity here to do something right, and somebody said something, instead of working a deal at the back end always with Indigenous people, start working it at the front end. And that's where they missed their opportunity with, you know, any kind of a deal at all here. With the police in Ontario, I think the police gave the governments a lot of time to wake up and to actually start talking to people. They kept talking about dialogue and rule of law. And meanwhile, they were just sitting back and not really saying or doing anything or trying very hard until it was almost too late, and then Mark Miller got involved. I think it's up to governments to pull their socks together and get moving on this. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen. The longer this goes, the more chance that something bad is going to happen.
Yeah, Brett, I'd like to get your thoughts on that, what Dan's saying. You know, the OPP did give considerable amount of time. I don't think we've seen you know, times when Indigenous peoples haven't been taken off their land and these types of things. But you had a lot of the politicians commenting, why are you letting this drag out? They had that blockade up for 19 days. What are your thoughts, and what did you hear from politicians in Ottawa over that?
Well, I do remember Andrew Scheer. He was giving a press conference just outside the House of Commons, and he called on Trudeau to act. He said, Andrew Scheer said if he was Prime Minister, he would have called in the RCMP right away. And Justin Trudeau was in Munich when this happened, and he responded saying Canada is a country of the rule of law, but we also don't tell police what to do in operational matters. And he's maintained that position pretty much throughout. He said we will neither tell the RCMP to move in, but we also won't tell the RCMP to move out. Now, you've also seen he changed positions pretty abruptly on Friday, I believe it was. He said now it was time for the barricades to come down. And after the weekend, on Monday, the OPP was moving in. So perhaps they don't tell the police what to do, but that was a pretty strong signal about that. But you do have to recognize, as has been said, that there was a lot of time. There was a lot of restraint as we saw Scheer called on Trudeau to move in right away, and he held off. But on the other hand, we've also seen other opposition members, such as Jagmeet Singh and Green Party leaders and Bloc Québécois leaders, have said if they were Prime Minister, they would have hopped on a plane and went to meet with the hereditary chiefs right away. So there's been many different viewpoints on how this should have been handled. And I think I do understand Dan's point that this really was a missed opportunity to avoid conflict and avoid a standoff.
Chief Gale, how do you feel the BC provincial and the federal government have handled this? Should the Prime Minister be on a plane? Should he have already been and getting himself out there?
Well, I've already said that in my previous comments. I mean, communication, honesty, and respect are very important aspects when it comes to consent. And by asking for consent shows respect to the people and their ancestors. And it also eliminates the entitlement that one system has over another. I mean, this is a very important discussion that needs to be had, and there's so much more work that needs to be done. And that's the starting point, is getting to those communities and having that discussion.
Chief Gale, what is the best possible outcome here in your opinion?
I think the best possible outcome is for the people to have the ability to say yes or no. I mean, that's what it would be for our community. You know, we have to consult with our community on many levels, and we do that by having community meetings. I mean, just 2 weeks ago we had 3 meetings in 1 week. So there's a lot of information that needs to be shared with our members, and we need their input. They're guiding the path forward, and they're doing it in a way that, you know, meets our needs for future generations. We don't just live in the present, we live in the future.
What is that path forward for your community, though?
Well, for our community, we've been involved with resource development for over 50, 60 years. And so we are always looking for that balanced approach through environmental stewardship and economic prosperity. It has to strike the balance. You can't have one and not the other. So we, as a nation, are working hard to get baseline information. So if a major project does come into our territory and is going to be in our lands for 30 to 50 years, we have information. We have cumulative effects information so that we can base our decisions on facts and have the tools to not just focus on profits, but focus on what's right and how we want to move forward with our land management.
Dan, how do you see things resolving themselves? I mean, I think everybody can realize and recognize here that there's much more taking place right now than a pipeline.
Unfortunately, you know, I'm going on past experience. I think that the government right now has fallen into a trap where they do what they did before, and they delay, they stall, they say all kinds of nice words. Meanwhile, things just get tired. Public opinion and anger starts to well up, and people just really, you know, just go. They stop working against it, whether it's at the blockades or information meetings or going to meetings. They just get frustrated and they throw up their hands because there's never any resolution coming from the government side. So its tactic really is just to wait it out more than anything else. Just keep saying all the nice things and hope that nobody gets hurt and doesn't ramp up. My feeling is that that's what's going to happen. It's just going to get boring and everybody will go home.
Ms. Wickham, last word to you. We've got about 30 seconds here.
Yeah, I think that the government's had a lot of time to come to the table and have discussions with us. The whole month that we had the territories blocked off, they had that opportunity and they did an assessment. Are they going to be able to deal with the outfall of a few protests? I don't think that they were expecting what they received. And I think that if they hold off any longer, things are going to escalate, and they need to step in and take responsibility for their relationship with the Wet'suwet'en and with other Indigenous people.
Thank you very much to all of you. That is unfortunately all the time we have. It could have been a full day show, I'm sure. Our thanks to MLA Ellis Ross. Unfortunately, we lost him this last block. To Molly Wickham, our reporter Brett Forrester, to Dan David, and to Chief Sharlene Gale. As well to all of you for tuning in, calling in, and to our crew and to producer Beverly Andrews. This episode, as all of our episodes are available for download as a podcast on our website at aptnnews.ca/podcasts. And if you missed any of the shows and want to catch up, you can check out our website, aptnnews.ca. That's where you'll also find APTN's full coverage on this topic. Again, thanks to all the callers and everybody. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great afternoon.